What's up, my crunchy little potato pancakes? You know what time it is. It is FPL fantasy time. We're coming at you with another recording. I know you're like, Doc just had his solo release for his FPL draft for game week 1, and now there's another one within a week? It's correct. Yes, we're trying to bring you as much content as we possibly can for this preseason. Before we get into it, I'd like to introduce my man, co-host, the gentleman, Doc. Doc, what do you got going on?
Well, I'm happy that the video is doing well. My first ever solo. It was not the same without you, Joe, but we have put content out there and I'm happy about it. It's doing quite well. I'm liking the likes, I'm liking the support that I'm seeing on the videos. Anybody watching this video, if you haven't, just go check out my latest draft.
Yep, for sure, everybody. Go and check it out. So, you see from the title, we have preseason performers that we're looking to talk about today. Real quick insight before we jump into the video. We have 2 slides per team that we are looking at. The first slide is going to be the teams that they have played against and the teams they still have yet to play. And then the second slide is going to be a couple players that we took out that are doing pretty well on those teams. Now, we didn't go over all 20 teams because I started to do that and my mind started spinning because it was going to be like a decade of mashing stuff together. And the other thing I want to mention is Man City and Liverpool. Those teams, they've had a really small window for their preseason, so they haven't played a ton of games, but you know who they are. You know that they're worth the investment. You're going to get probably Cancelo and maybe another City attacker and Liverpool. Just so you're prepared before you start commenting, screaming at us, where's City, where's Liverpool, what about Holland? Holland got 1 goal. He's not in this video. He's not a top performer in the preseason. Doc, you ready to get into the video?
Let's get into this preseason recap and I hope it helps all our audience kind of see everything in one place. What happened, what are the highlights, and what are the players to target.
All right, so Doc, first up we have Arsenal. Now, they haven't had necessarily the easiest run of fixtures in the preseason. You can see they have Chelsea, Everton. They played Brentford. They went to good old USA, played Orlando City, MLS, but then they do have 2 kind of easier fixtures that they've had where it's a Bundesliga 2 and League 1 team, but they do have La Liga team coming up. So they're not taking necessarily preseason super easy. What do you think about the opponents and who they have left to play?
I like the mixture here. I'm really curious to see the rest of the games, how they line up, because again, and we're going to see in the next slide, the target is Jesus. Everybody is on Jesus. If everybody watched the video that I put out yesterday regarding my draft, I don't have Jesus in my draft. So if he scores a goal or 2 versus Sevilla, I might be forced to put him in. I can afford him in that draft. So I'm very interested to see how they line up. I don't have Jesus mainly because Nketiah has been performing in preseason, and I feel like there will be a bit of rotation between Jesus and Nketiah. So it's very interesting to see how they line up in the next games.
So we have our 3 players that we're looking at here. We have Jesus, who performed like a stud. Nketiah, people are probably noticing, hey, you have 1 less goal than he actually had on there. I noticed that as soon as I was done with all the graphics. My apologies. I know he had 5 goals. I'm so sorry, community. Please don't drag me through the mud. We have our 3 Arsenal players here. We have Nketiah, we have Jesus, and we have Sembi. What do you think about all 3 of these guys here?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm very interested to see how Nketiah and Jesus do in the next 2. Jesus also kind of has a history of injury. He went off with a knock, I believe, in the last game as well in the preseason. So I'm very interested into seeing those 2. Lokonga, or Sambi as he is in the FPL website. Yeah, he's doing well, but I don't think I'll be looking at him anytime soon. He got 2 goals, 3 assists, but the target is kind of, you want to look at one defender from Arsenal: Saka, Martinelli, Jesus, and Nketiah. Those are kind of the options that I have in mind.
One of the issues that I think will come up is Nketiah and Sembi. They have kind of been playing, yes, a little bit with the first team, but also with the second team in the preseason. So Maybe a little bit of their stats are inflated, but Arteta did say that he's interested in switching up formations and making positions that essentially work for everyone. That might lead to two forwards up top, Nketiah and Jesus. I think it's more likely that we see Nketiah and then Sembi. And yes, Martinelli and Saka, we know who they are. They're studs in their own right. Yes, they haven't performed like the guys that we see up here in preseason, but we know they're going to come out and they're going to get solid points.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the last video, kind of is a wait and see for me. Even if I don't start with Jesus or Nketiah, they have Crystal Palace away. It's not going to be an easy game. They have Leicester at home without any European commitments. It's not going to be an easy game. So it's a good opportunity for me to kind of gauge who's going to be playing, starting, scoring. So even if the preseason don't give us enough information, the first two games will give us enough information. And the way I have set up my draft, as I mentioned in the last episode, is I can jump on one of them, either Nketiah or Jesus, in game week 3 easily with a free transfer without needing to kind of get the funds from somewhere else. Watkins is kind of the placeholder for them in the first two games. So I'm very interested in getting one Arsenal attacker. It's just I don't know who yet. In my draft currently, I have Martinelli, and I think Martinelli, despite only 3 returns in the preseason, as you see, well, as you don't you don't see, but we kind of researched this, and he got 3 returns only. But I think he will start, and he's a great value.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sitting on Martinelli myself. I believe my current draft has Jesus too, but we'll see. I'm going back and forth between a
So who's
million
going
different options.
differential now? Who's the Maverick manager? You got broken, Joe.
I
FPL
brought
Twitter
in
has to.
Martinelli first. uh, so let's move on to our next team that we have here. Good old Brentford, one of my favorite underdog teams in the league right now. So Brentford, they didn't play too bad of a preseason either. They had Brighton, they had Arsenal, then they also had two Bundesliga games that they have, and they have a La Liga game that's coming up. They have top tier French team that they played against too. What do you think about their opponents and what they're doing and who they're going up against in preseason, Doc?
Well, it seems like relatively they've been playing a lot of German teams, not surprised there, but Brighton is the only Premier League team I can see here. The preparations might not be that great. I have Raya in my draft. Boom scored 3 goals in those preseasons. So probably a defender from Brentford will do. They don't have Ericsson anymore, so attacking wise, we'll see how they do in the Premier League. But for now, I'm steering clear from the attacking options. I've seen some Tonys in some drafts, but I think there are better options than Tony at the moment, despite the decent fixtures that they have. It's just because of Ericsson leaving.
Yeah, and we kind of transitioned over to the players while you were talking there. And Bomo, my man, good old Brian. He's here. He has 3 goals. He's an interesting look. I think he's probably, and this is controversial, and here's the Maverick in me, I think he's actually the better pick than Tony right now. Save yourself $1 million. Go get yourself a Brian.
Well, the penalties kind of sways it for Tony on this side. I don't know if we have the statistics how many woodwork he has hit in the preseason, Boomo, but again, he is definitely an option down the line, maybe if you want a enabler. But for me, I'm steering clear of Brentford attacking options at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm actually steering clear of Brentford completely right now. They've had ups and downs in the preseason. I want to see a little bit more solidity within the team. But I'm just saying, if you want to go crazy and you want a Brentford attacker, good old Brian, he's happy to help.
With a couple of woodwork shots.
Oh, yeah. Moving to the next team for us, we have Crystal Palace. Now, they've also had a little bit of ups and downs in the preseason. They've let in a lot more goals than I think anybody really expected them to let through. I think they're still trying to figure it out. What's preseason for if not to get that chemistry back and get everything ready to go for the actual season? As we can see, they did play against Liverpool, United, Leeds in the Premier League. They played against QPR and various other lower division teams, though, also throughout the preseason. They have one game coming up. Doc, what does the preseason schedule look like for you?
It's crazy that they played Liverpool, Manchester United in the preseason. I like how they're preparing for the season. I don't like saying this, but I really, I would say my second team this season will be Crystal Palace. I really enjoy what Vieira's doing with the team. He took the team and he made it a mid-table team from a team that was fighting relegation. So I love what Vieira's doing with kind of the similar core players. Now the players have changed, of course, and he brought some players out last season, but I really enjoy watching Crystal Palace play. They are one of the most defensive teams in the league. They don't concede much. They are workaholics, or like they run the whole time and they work hard on the pitch. So I really enjoy it. Surprisingly, if we want to move on to the next slide, what caught my eye in Crystal Palace preseason is Benteke scoring a hat trick of goals and a hat trick of assists. He didn't start a lot last season with Vieira, so I wonder if that will make Vieira start him in the beginning of the season. They don't have the fixtures, unfortunately, so I don't think I'll be going for any Crystal Palace at the beginning, but they can always show up. Zaha is a great option. He's the highest performing player, and we've seen some threads appearing how people are ignoring Zaha. What do you think about Zaha, Joe? I know last season, whenever I tried to go for him, you were against it.
Hey, all I want is just a little bit of consistency, and the man struggles to understand what that word means. That's all I ask out of my players. Now, obviously, in preseason, he's killing it. He found some sense of consistency over these bunch of games that they've been playing, and when he's on, he's definitely a fixture-proof type of player. But now, is he going to carry that into the season? And like you had mentioned, not really going to start with anybody from Crystal Palace going into the season, but I think it's around game week 5 their fixtures kind of lighten up a little bit. That would be when I'm looking to possibly bring in a Crystal Palace player, and then maybe even hold out another game week or two, depending if I haven't hit that wild card yet, to kind of just bring them in on the wild card and not really blow a transfer on them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing a wildcard game week 2 from Joe.
Yes, yes. And the one other thing that I wanted to mention is, so you mentioned how Benteke didn't have like an actual starting position, and we saw with the forwards almost nobody in Crystal Palace had a starting position. I think Vieira was trying to find that guy that would click. I mean, Edouard ended up getting rotated, and he cooled off after everybody had brought him in and thought he was the best thing ever to FPL. And Mateta, he seemed promising, but then he cooled off and they couldn't get anything going through the forward line. So hopefully this Benteke is here to stay and here to help out, and he could definitely be an option. All right, moving to the next team, we have a dark horse, Fulham. They've played 2 top league Portugal teams, and they have a La Liga team coming in as their last game of the preseason. Doc, what do you think about Fulham in their preseason? Kind of a weird one, isn't it?
So Fulham, it's definitely a weird team to bring up. They had a preseason without kind of relatively a really big team there. Like you have Nice and you have Benfica, probably the biggest team. They will play Villarreal. So let's see how it goes there. But they haven't done the transfers that kind of Nottingham Forest are doing. So I wonder how they will play. Mitrovic is probably the player that comes to mind. I'm very interested to see how Wilson does. Uh, he's one of my favorite players to watch, especially in the championship last season. He's on he has some sweet free kicks on him. So it will be interesting to see. But it is, yeah, it's a weird team among all the teams, 20 teams you bring on. Fulham, who, if I had to make a prediction now, I think they will get relegated. But let's see how the transfer window goes.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned it. Good old Mitrovic. He's the guy that I ended up putting on the slide. I know people are rolling their eyes and everything, but 3 goals, 1 assist. He kind of has carried Fulham through preseason, as he tends to do and as we know he can do. I think one of the things that he gets a lot of slack for is the last time in the Premier League he didn't quite get the points everybody was expecting him to, and didn't get the returns that he was expected to get, really. But I think one of the things to keep in mind is he was on the bench for like half the season. He was coming off the bench and getting maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Now they went down to the championship. He played. He scored goals. We know he can score in the Premier League. We've seen him do it. I'm just interested to see what happens with Fulham, because yes, Wilson is going to be an outstanding player. I hope that he can really shine, but he doesn't really have a team around him that kind of eases the pressure and lets him just get comfortable and play. The other thing that's interesting to mention here, which I'm sure everybody watching this knows, Pereira, 4.5 mid, looks like he's starting. He has 2 assists on the preseason, both of them to Mitrovic from corners. So that's something to keep in mind if you need to fill that 4.5 spot, which I know a lot of people are looking there, or looking at Brentford's De Silva. Some interesting picks that we have there. I know it's kind of a weird one to throw Fulham on here. It felt weird putting a newly promoted team on here, but I think it's just an interesting conversation to definitely have, because Mitrovic is performing. Is Fulham going to stay up? Probably not, but as long as he gets points, I don't care what the defense does if I'm going for an attacker.
Absolutely agree.
Moving to the next team, we have Leicester City. They had, I don't know, what I would say kind of a light and easy preseason that they've been managing here. I expected to see probably a little bit more returns from Leicester City given the type of competition that they've been going up against, but I feel like they've also been playing a little lighter on their lineups. Keep in mind, everybody, Harvey Barnes, he has 3 goals. Don't bring him in. We've seen this before. Everybody knows what happens. Don't bring in Barnes. Doc, what do you think about their preseason schedule that they had?
As you mentioned, they went for the kind of the easier choices with Notts County and Hull City, Derby, Preston, and I think it's Provence, Louvain, I believe. But they have a tough game versus Sevilla, so let's see how they do. As I mentioned in many of our videos previously, Leicester do not have European football this season, so I'm very interested in their assets. Probably Madison is the most interesting one. Harvey Barnes is extremely frustrating own in FPL, so probably he kind of will never be in my team to a certain extent unless there is a double, 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 double. But yeah, the main player that caught my eye also was Daka. I think Daka, with a hat trick of goals and an assist here, and Vardy reaching. We always say that Vardy is getting too old, but he keeps coming back and scoring, and he's always an option. At this price point, he's probably a bit overpriced for the beginning. So Daka, kind of, if we want to see it as a replacement for Vardy, he can be a good option. But for me, it's only about Madison for now. Maybe some of the defenders, because they have been underpriced and they might perform well. Vestergaard is 4.0, so if you're looking for a second 4.0 defender beside Nico Williams, Vestergaard can be an option.
There's definitely some interesting choices that we have with Leicester. Like you had mentioned, Vardy, he's getting old, but he keeps scoring. We do the same thing every year. Oh no, Vardy's old, he's not going to do it. He consistently scores against top 6 teams. He's actually one of the best goal scorers against top 6 teams, which is something to think about. But he's also at a weird price point. You can't really flex to anybody easily. You can always drop down, but then you have a bunch of free cash, so you almost feel obligated to make a second move. So on our players here, like you had mentioned, we have Daka. I have a soft spot for Daka. That's what it is. And every time I end up shouting him out, he ends up doing all right for me. But I never bring him in, so maybe this year's the year that I bring him in. And with Vardy getting older, you might see a little more rotation in the lineup. I know that we saw a little bit of rotation last year, but they also don't have as many games to play this year. So that's something to keep in mind. If we do start to see Vardy kind of rotate a little bit more, get subbed out early, maybe Daka's the move if you want to hit that forward line. Madison's definitely the guy that I have in my team right now that I'm looking at keeping. I think he can be a stellar performer for us. He just needs to stay healthy and keep consistent, really, is his biggest thing. The second guy that we have on here is Drewsbury Hall. Cheap priced, seems to be performing pretty well. Performed really good last year, I feel like, especially for his expected outcome versus what actually happened. So I wouldn't necessarily say he's a get, but he's definitely somebody to keep your eye on. I think a lot of people are bringing him in, and I'm not getting it 100% yet. I want to see a little bit more out of him before I even think about making that move.
I like watching Drewsbury Hall play. He's a great footballer. Is he an FPL asset at 5.0? At 4.5, definitely. You will see him in most of the teams. But at 5.0, he can be a good enabler at one point. But at the beginning of the season, I don't see him in many teams, especially they're playing kind of relatively mixed fixtures and they go on the tougher side.
Yeah, FPL missed a couple opportunities of pricing him at 6 million and just calling him Rafinha, and everybody would have gotten him in just based off of the name and the price.
Rafinha left the league, Joe. Let it go. Rafinha left the league.
Exactly, and we're better for it. All right, you'll all be better managers for it. Moving on to the next team, we have Newcastle. Newcastle, once again, one of those teams that I kind of feel like had a little bit of a light preseason. They did end up playing a few more difficult teams, and they have two kind of difficult teams coming up. Doc, what do you think about the preseason schedule?
Well, they played Burnley twice. If it's not enough to play them once, let's play them twice. So talk about stats padding. So sorry, Burnley fans, but yeah, it's a championship team currently with a lot of players out and a lot of players possibly leaving. So they've scored a lot of goals.
Yeah, and I mean that's the biggest thing about Burnley is they've lost Tarkowski, they've lost me, they've lost Veghorst, who I know was there for a season. Does he count? I don't know. They lost Pope. There's nobody left. They're just playing their academy team, essentially. So looking at the players for Newcastle, surprise dark horse Almiron coming out of nowhere. I think getting the most goals of preseason right now. He's got 6. I know they played against the light side, but let's be honest. I mean, still 6 goals is 6 goals. We don't see a lot of these other teams that are kind of using preseason as a warm-up rather than getting on pace with the same caliber of skill that you're going to be playing during the season. We don't see any of those teams with 6 goals to a player. So he's an interesting pick. I'm curious to see how he fits into the season and what he's really going to end up doing. I think Newcastle have something that they're working on. I think it could be very special. Additionally, we have Saint Maxim. He's gotten 3 assists, I think, which is kind of a surprise because typically we would expect him to just have 4 goals across the board. But I feel like he might be playing a little bit more of that support role in preseason and kind of the playmaker, where he's probably going to end up getting more assists and creating opportunities and opening up space for people like Almiron, Willock, Wilson, those type of guys. So something definitely to keep an eye on. What do you think about this, Doc?
Almiron's price is actually tempting me at 5.0. He'll definitely be an option at one point. He didn't start many games last season, but if he gets those stars this season, he can be a great option. I like him as a player as well, as a football player, not only an FPL option. He has a sweet foot as well. He scores a lot of finesse goals, the ones that I usually like. So those goals, I'm not surprised that he scored, but we would need to see him in the Premier League doing better, and he's definitely an option at this price point.
For sure, for sure. Moving to our next squad, good old Spurs, Tottenham. They played the Team K League, which I want to mention. This is like so cool. I didn't know this was a thing anywhere else in the world. Back when I was a kid, the MLS teams weren't good enough to play against any team in the world, basically. So you had this team called the MLS All Stars. It was all the best players from all the teams would play against Barcelona or Manchester United or those type of clubs. And this is kind of what we have here. Is the K League just has their all stars that they throw on a team to have games against this and against like the Spurs, which is, I don't know. It's a cool thing to me. I like those all-star league teams. And then also, I mean, the rest of the games that Tottenham really have, they aren't really pushover games either. And the Rangers game was a pretty good game. I don't know if anybody out there ended up watching it, but it was a good game, and Conte was pretty happy with the results. But he is a coach, very much like myself, of there's always room for improvement. But hey, good job tonight. We'll work on more stuff tomorrow. What do you think, Doc, about the schedule for Tottenham?
I like that they played the K League team. I'm not surprised though because Hyun-Min Son is almost a cult hero. He's almost as famous as anybody in South Korea. So of course we know that the preseason one of the main goals is the commercial reasons. That's why they chose Korea to go there. Tottenham. We heard that a lot of teams got affected by the pandemic last season. That's why they didn't have as many revenues as possible. So I'm not surprised that they've been to Korea, and it's an amazing thing to see. I hope to see it more in other nations. Of course, the goal is commercial, but it was nice to see. And of course, our boy Sonaldo definitely performed there. They're facing very good teams, Sevilla, Rangers, and they're going to play Roma soon as well. So it's a tough schedule, and it's nice to see.
We're looking at Son and Kane as the two players, and I mean, I think all you have to do is say their name and move on. They're kind of in that group with Salah. You know, it's Son and Kane. All right, next team. Kane coming in, 5 goals, 1 assist. Son, 2 goals, 4 assists. They do what they do. They feed each other. They work great together. And yeah, there's other people on the team also, I guess.
Well, I should mention that if you saw my video yesterday and I had Dyer scored a goal in preseason.
Mhm.
So that's not the reason I brought him in. I had him, I think, last season as well. I like Dyer because he has the minutes, and I like my minutes, so Dyer can be an option. He's on some free kicks as well. Some free kicks, I should mention, I should stress. But I think there will be potential for Dyer to score high points. He's kind of my dark horse for this season. I don't know if I'm going to start with him. I'm trying, I'm tinkering, but there is a good chance I'm going to have him at one point in this season, especially if Perisic stops being an option.
All right, now moving to our last team of the video. Good old Wolves. They've been the talk of the town. People love them. People love some of their players. It's easy to look good when you play high school teams. I love it. What do you think about their schedule, Doc?
I wouldn't call them high school teams, but they're close as it gets. Burnley there again. Yeah, it's not as tough as, let's say, Crystal Palace's preparations. So yeah, and they're still playing Sporting and Firenze in the next games. So it's not the toughest schedule in the world. No.
Those 2 games to play are the 2 games that I'm like really interested to see, like, okay, what happens, because you'll see here they played Villarreal, La Liga. Oh, it's their B team. Oh, okay, never mind, that doesn't count. So moving on to the players, we have Podence and we have Neto. Everybody seems to have them except for myself and maybe like 3 other people in the world. Podence, nobody is talking about, but he's matching goal for goal, assist for assist with Neto in the preseason. I understand Neto's that explosive, that attacking guy that everybody likes, but hey, it doesn't matter how explosive you are. It matters what you do with the score line when it comes to FPL, right? I'm not sold on Wolves yet. I haven't even considered looking at any of their players. Jimenez just got hurt in the last game that they played, so now they have a giant hole at forward. Who knows what's going to happen? Doc, finish out the video.
Well, I would be surprised if I don't start the season without Neto. For me, he's the best enabler currently available. The problem is people expecting whenever they have a player in their team, it's either like absolute blanks or a total 4 goals every game. You shouldn't expect that from Neto. What I expect from him is to tick along nicely for his price point. So If he scores a hat trick, great. If he flops, fine, you move him on. So he's at this price point. So Neto is kind of the enabler for almost every team. People are moving to Podence because Podence possibly starting at the number 9 instead of Jimenez, who's injured, I think, for 8 game weeks or 8 weeks from now. So he's gonna miss a lot of games. Podence is an option, but for me, Neto is a more assured starter, and I'm not worried about when is Jimenez coming back. And
Yeah, I think you guys can, keep your Neto, and me and Bailey or Almiron will go out and use the extra point 0.5 to get some ice cream.
you have to go different, Joe. You have to go different.
Yes, yes. All right, so everybody, rounding out this video, wanted to say thank you for listening. We hope that some of these reviews and looks into players maybe put somebody on your radar that you weren't thinking about, or maybe made you reconsider Neto, or I mean anybody else that we had mentioned that has a lot of people behind them. Thank you again. Doc, anything else you'd like to say before we close out?
Well, I'd like to say if you enjoyed the episode and enjoy the content, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, give us your feedback. For example, in my last video, within the first hour, someone mentioned that the font is small, so we'll make sure that the font is more optimized in the future. So we listen to your feedback, we appreciate it, and we'll see everybody on the next episode.
All right, everybody, we'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Peace.